The crystal glasses clinked together as Patricia raised her champagne flute. Every eye in the restaurant turned toward Andrew's mother, waiting for her toast at our engagement dinner. "To my wonderful son Andrew," she began, her voice carrying across the private dining room. "May he always aim high in everything he does." Polite laughter rippled through the gathered family and friends. I smiled nervously, expecting warm words about our upcoming marriage. Patricia's smile grew sharper as she continued. "And may he find a wife who can actually keep up with his ambitions." The laughter died instantly. My stomach dropped as her words hit like a slap across the face. 20 people stared at me, some with pity, others with embarrassment. "To Andrew," Patricia finished, taking a long sip while maintaining eye contact with me. I sat frozen in my chair, my engagement ring suddenly feeling heavy on my finger. The woman who was about to become my mother-in-law had just publicly declared that I wasn't good enough for her son. Andrew reached for my hand under the table, but the damage was already done. Every person in that room had heard Patricia's verdict on my worth. My cheeks burned with humiliation as I forced my lips into a smile and raised my water glass in response. The silence that followed Patricia's toast stretched for what felt like hours. Conversations resumed slowly, but I could feel the uncomfortable glances and whispered exchanges happening around our table. Andrew sat beside me, his jaw clenched but his mouth firmly closed. His silence was almost worse than his mother's words. This was the moment when he should have defended me, should have told his mother her comment was inappropriate. Instead, he cut his salmon and acted like nothing had happened. The words echoed in my head, "Find a wife who can actually keep up." Not congratulations. Not welcome to the family. A public dismissal of my value as Andrew's partner. I excused myself to the bathroom, walking carefully on shaking legs. Behind me, I heard Patricia's voice resume its cheerful tone as she launched into a story about Andrew's childhood achievements. In the mirror, my reflection looked pale and shaken. Mascara threatened to run despite my best efforts to hold back tears. When I returned to the table, Patricia was showing photos of Andrew's latest business deal to my parents, completely ignoring my existence. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of forced conversations and fake smiles. But her words had planted themselves in my mind like poisoned seeds. In the parking lot after dinner, I finally lost my composure. The tears I had been holding back all evening poured out as I fumbled with my car keys. "Aaron, wait," Andrew called, jogging after me. "Don't take it personally. She's just protective. She didn't mean it that way." I turned to face him, mascara streaking down my cheeks. "Didn't mean what? That I'm not good enough for you?" "She's old-fashioned. She thinks everyone should be more ambitious, more driven. It's not about you specifically." The excuse felt hollow, but Andrew seemed to believe it. He looked genuinely confused by my reaction, as if his mother's public humiliation was just a minor social awkwardness. "No," I whispered, my voice steady despite the tears. She meant every word. I had known Patricia for 6 months, and every interaction had been a subtle reminder that I didn't meet her standards. The engagement dinner was just the first time she had said it out loud. Andrew started to protest, but I held up my hand. "Your mother just told a room full of people that you should find someone better than me. And you said nothing." I didn't want to make a scene. I got into my car without another word, leaving Andrew standing alone in the parking lot under the streetlights. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection through red, swollen eyes. Patricia's words replayed in my mind, "Find a wife who can actually keep up." The woman looking back at me was 26 years old, college-educated, and working as a marketing coordinator at a small firm. Not glamorous, but respectable. I had always thought that was enough. But apparently, it wasn't enough for Patricia's son. I leaned closer to the mirror, studying my face as if seeing it for the first time. "I'll never let her define me again," I whispered to my reflection. The words felt like a promise, a vow to myself that was more binding than any engagement ring. Over the next few days, I threw myself into work with new intensity. If Patricia thought I lacked ambition, I would prove her wrong. If she thought I couldn't keep up with Andrew, I would surpass him. I started researching business opportunities, reading industry publications, and networking with professionals in my field. The hurt from the engagement dinner transformed into fuel for something bigger. My reflection in the mirror had changed. The uncertain young woman was gone, replaced by someone with steel in her spine and fire in her eyes. Patricia had no idea what she had unleashed. Our wedding day arrived 6 months later, and Patricia made sure everyone knew she wasn't thrilled about it. She wore white, not cream, not ivory, but pure white that closely matched my wedding dress. "Oh, did I make a mistake?" she asked innocently when my mother pointed out the color choice. I thought cream was traditional for mothers of the groom. The dress was also more elaborate than anything else she had worn to previous family events, with intricate beading and a dramatic train that swept behind her as she walked. During the ceremony, she positioned herself in the front row where her white dress would be visible in every photo. When the photographer tried to rearrange family members for better composition, Patricia refused to move. "I'm perfectly comfortable here," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The most painful moment came during our vows. As Andrew spoke about his love and commitment, Patricia sighed loudly enough for the entire congregation to hear. Not once, but 3 times, each sigh timed perfectly to interrupt the most romantic moments. I maintained my composure throughout the ceremony, smiling serenely as if I didn't notice her deliberate disruptions. But inside, I was taking notes. Every slight, every calculated insult was being catalogued for future reference. After the wedding, Andrew and I started house hunting. We found a charming 2-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood, perfect for newlyweds just starting their careers. When we invited Patricia over to see our new place, she declined with barely concealed disdain. "I'm not interested in downgrading my neighborhood," she said during a phone call that Andrew put on speaker. "I'll visit when you find something more appropriate." The comment stung, but it also clarified something important. Patricia would never be satisfied with anything I brought to the relationship. Her disapproval wasn't about specific shortcomings, it was about her fundamental belief that I wasn't worthy of her son. We bought the house anyway, decorating it with furniture from discount stores and second-hand shops. It was small but cozy, filled with plants and books and the kind of warmth that comes from building something together. 2 weeks after we moved in, a card arrived in the mail with Patricia's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a photo of a mansion with the message, "Cute starter home. Hope you can move up someday." I showed the card to Andrew, who just shrugged. "She's trying to motivate us," he said. "She wants us to be successful." But I knew better. Patricia wasn't trying to motivate us, she was reminding me of my place in her family hierarchy. I kept the card in my desk drawer as motivation. For the first 3 years of our marriage, I avoided Patricia as much as possible. Family dinners were torture sessions where she found subtle ways to criticize everything about me, from my career choice to my cooking to my fashion sense. Andrew continued to defend her with increasingly weak excuses. "She's just traditional," became his standard response. "She means well." Traditional doesn't excuse cruelty, I told him after one particularly brutal holiday dinner where Patricia had spent an hour detailing the accomplishments of Andrew's ex-girlfriend. "She's not being cruel. She's just particular about standards." The conversation always ended the same way, with Andrew making excuses and me feeling more isolated within my own marriage. I started declining family invitations, claiming work commitments or other obligations. Patricia's relief was obvious whenever I wasn't present, which only confirmed that my absence was the gift she had always wanted. But something was changing inside me. The hurt was transforming into determination. If Patricia thought I was beneath her family's standards, I would create my own standards that surpassed anything she could imagine. I began planning something that would prove my worth once and for all. The distance between Patricia and me grew wider, but I was no longer running away. I was preparing. Andrew and I started our design company from our kitchen table. What began as a side project helping friends with branding and marketing materials slowly grew into something bigger. I handled the creative work while Andrew managed client relationships. Our complementary skills made us an effective team, and word-of-mouth referrals kept us busy during evenings and weekends. When we mentioned the business at a family dinner, Patricia's reaction was predictably dismissive. "A little art project?" she laughed, cutting into her expensive steak. "How charming. Like a hobby that pays for itself." "It's actually generating significant income," Andrew said, trying to sound proud despite his mother's tone. "Income? Or just beer money?" Patricia asked with obvious amusement. "Real businesses require substantial investment and professional management." I smiled politely while mentally noting her condescension. "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "Professional management is essential for growth." What I didn't tell her was that I had already been developing a business plan that would transform our little art project into something substantial. Patricia had no idea that her dismissal was fueling my ambition rather than discouraging it. "We'll see how long it lasts," she said, returning to her dinner with the satisfied air of someone who had put pretenders in their proper place. But I was already planning to prove her wrong. Over the next 2 years, our design company exceeded every expectation. What started as evening work grew into a full-time business with a growing client roster and increasing revenue. We moved out of our small house and into a larger office space downtown. Our team expanded from just Andrew and me to 6 full-time employees. Industry publications began featuring our work, and major brands started seeking our services. Patricia watched our growth with obvious skepticism. "It's a good run," she acknowledged during one family dinner. "But these creative businesses are so unpredictable. One bad year and it's all gone." She never visited our office or showed interest in what we had built. When Andrew tried to share details about major client wins or industry recognition, she would change the subject to more serious topics. Her refusal to acknowledge our success only motivated me further. Every dismissive comment became fuel for working harder, growing faster, and building something undeniable. By the end of our second full year in business, we were generating 7-figure revenue and had a waiting list of potential clients. Patricia still refused to visit our office, claiming she was too busy with important commitments. But her indifference was about to become irrelevant. Forces beyond her control were already in motion that would change everything about our relationship. The news broke on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly reports. Andrew's father's investment firm was under federal investigation for securities fraud. Ponzi scheme, the headline read. Millions stolen from retirement accounts. I called Andrew immediately, my hands shaking as I read article after article detailing the scope of the scandal. His father had been running an elaborate fraud for over a decade, using new investors' money to pay fake returns to existing clients. How much did they lose? I asked Andrew, who was driving to his parents' house. Everything. The house, the cars, all their assets are frozen pending investigation. Patricia's mansion in the exclusive suburb where she had lived for 20 years was already listed for sale. The luxury cars, designer furniture, and expensive jewelry would all be liquidated to pay back defrauded investors. In less than 24 hours, Patricia had gone from wealthy socialite to financial ruin. I felt a complex mixture of emotions reading about her downfall. There was no satisfaction in watching someone's life collapse, even someone who had treated me with consistent cruelty. But there was also a strange sense of justice in seeing her forced to confront reality without the buffer of inherited wealth. Andrew's phone calls to his mother went unanswered for days. 3 weeks after the scandal broke, my phone rang at 8 in the evening. The caller ID showed Patricia's number, the first time she had ever called me directly. Aaron, her voice was smaller than I had ever heard it, trembling with uncertainty. I hope I'm not disturbing you. I set down the client proposal I had been reviewing and gave her my full attention. Not at all, Patricia. How are you holding up? I need to ask you something. And I know I don't have the right to ask for anything. The proud woman who had publicly humiliated me at my engagement dinner was gone, replaced by someone who sounded broken and desperate. I need a job, she said quickly, as if the words were physically painful. I know it's presumptuous, but I saw in the business journal that your company is expanding. I was wondering if you might have any positions available. I sat in stunned silence, remembering every insult, every dismissive comment, every moment when she had made me feel small and inadequate. Now she was calling me for help. Of course, Patricia, I heard myself say, my voice calm and professional. Why don't you come in tomorrow morning and we can discuss what might be available? The irony was almost too perfect to believe. I kept my tone light and businesslike during the phone call, as if Patricia were any other job applicant. We're always looking for experienced professionals, I continued. Your background in social coordination and event management could be valuable assets. Thank you, Patricia whispered, and I could hear tears in her voice. You don't know how much this means to me. After hanging up, I sat in my office for a long time, processing what had just happened. The woman who had once told a room full of people that her son should find someone better than me was now asking me for employment. The temptation to refuse her, to let her experience the same humiliation she had inflicted on me, was overwhelming. It would have been poetic justice to remind her of every cruel comment and then politely decline her request. But that would have made me exactly like her, someone who used power to hurt others. Instead, I saw an opportunity for something more meaningful than revenge. I could give Patricia what she had never given me, a chance to prove her worth through actions rather than accidents of birth. Andrew was amazed when I told him about the conversation. You're going to interview her? I'm going to hire her, I corrected. But she doesn't realize who's going to be making that decision. Patricia arrived at our office the next morning wearing a conservative navy suit that looked expensive but dated. Her usual confident posture was replaced by nervous uncertainty as she approached our reception desk. I have an appointment, she said quietly to our receptionist. Patricia Hamilton, here to see someone about employment opportunities. I watched from my office as she filled out paperwork, her hand slightly shaking as she wrote. The confident woman who had once dismissed our business as a little art project was now hoping to become part of it. When our receptionist pointed toward my office door, Patricia's eyes followed the gesture until she saw the nameplate, Aaron Hamilton, Chief Executive Officer. The color drained from her face as she realized who would be conducting her job interview. She stood frozen for a moment, clearly considering whether to leave immediately. But financial desperation won over pride, and she walked slowly toward my office. Hello, Patricia, I said, standing to greet her with a professional smile. Thank you for coming in. I didn't realize you were. She stammered, looking around my corner office with its awards, industry recognition, and view of the city skyline. Please, have a seat, I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. I'm excited to learn more about your experience and how you might contribute to our team. The interview was about to begin. I conducted the interview with complete professionalism, asking standard questions about experience, goals, and availability. Patricia answered carefully, her usual arrogance replaced by nervous humility. What interests you about working in the design industry? I asked, taking notes on her responses. I've always appreciated creative work, she said, her voice uncertain. And I understand the importance of client relationships and maintaining professional standards. It was clear that she was struggling to present herself as a valuable employee rather than someone who simply deserved a position based on family connections. What do you see as your greatest strength? Patricia hesitated, clearly unused to having to justify her abilities. I'm organized and detail-oriented. I understand the importance of presentation and quality. Her answers were generic and uninspiring, the responses of someone who had never needed to actually compete for anything. And what would you say is an area where you'd like to grow professionally? The question seemed to catch her off guard. I suppose I'd like to learn how to contribute more meaningfully to a team environment. It was perhaps the first honest thing she had said during the entire interview. We'll be in touch within a few days, I said, standing to indicate the interview was over. Patricia gathered her papers with shaking hands. Thank you for considering me. I know I don't deserve this opportunity. That evening, Andrew was incredulous when I told him about the interview. You're actually going to hire her? After everything she's put you through? Yes, I said simply. But not to humiliate her. To teach her. Teach her what? Empathy. Work ethic. The value of earning respect instead of expecting it. Andrew shook his head. You're too kind, Aaron. She's never shown you any consideration. But kindness wasn't my motivation. I was offering Patricia something more valuable than revenge, the opportunity to understand what it meant to build something through effort rather than inheritance. The next morning, I called Patricia with a job offer, administrative assistant, entry-level salary, probationary period of 6 months. Thank you, she whispered into the phone. I won't let you down. It was the first time Patricia had ever expressed gratitude to me for anything. Her transformation was about to begin, whether she realized it or not. I had learned that the most powerful form of justice wasn't punishment, it was giving someone the chance to become better than they had been. Patricia's first day would test whether she was capable of growth or would remain trapped by her own arrogance. Patricia's first day at our company was awkward for everyone involved. She arrived early, wearing the same navy suit from her interview, and sat stiffly at the desk we had assigned to her. I treated her exactly like any other new employee, professional, fair, and respectful. No special consideration for being Andrew's mother, but also no hint of the years of tension between us. Your primary responsibilities will be client file management and appointment scheduling, I explained during her orientation. Quality and attention to detail are essential in everything we do. Patricia nodded earnestly, taking notes in a small notebook she had brought from home. The woman who had once dismissed our business as irrelevant was now hanging on every word about our procedures and standards. The other employees were initially uncomfortable with the situation, but they followed my lead in treating Patricia as a colleague rather than the boss's mother. By lunchtime, Patricia looked exhausted from the mental effort of learning new systems and protocols. She ate alone at her desk, studying training materials with the focus of someone who couldn't afford to fail. How are you adjusting? I asked when I stopped by her desk that afternoon. It's more complex than I expected, she admitted quietly. I didn't realize how much coordination goes into each project. For the first time, Patricia was beginning to understand the work behind our success. Over the following weeks, Patricia struggled to adapt to the demands of a regular work schedule. She had never held a job that required her to be productive for 8 hours straight, and the adjustment was clearly difficult. I watched her learn our systems, make mistakes, and slowly improve through repetition and practice. There were moments when her old entitled attitude would surface, quickly followed by embarrassed recognition of how inappropriate it was. I don't understand why this client is being so demanding, she complained after a particularly difficult phone call. Don't they realize we're doing them a favor? Actually, they're doing us a favor by trusting us with their business, I corrected gently. Our job is to exceed their expectations, not the other way around. Patricia looked confused for a moment, then nodded slowly. I never thought about it that way. It was a small breakthrough, but significant. She was beginning to understand that business relationships were built on value delivered, not status assumed. One evening, I found her staying late to finish a project that had taken longer than expected. You don't have to work overtime, I told her. It can wait until tomorrow. I want to get it right, she replied, not looking up from her computer. I didn't realize how hard you worked to build all this. The admission came quietly, but it represented a fundamental shift in her understanding. 3 months into Patricia's employment, she approached my office late one evening. Most of the staff had gone home, and I was finishing up client proposals for the next day. Aaron, could I speak with you for a moment? She stood in my doorway looking smaller than I had ever seen her, her confidence completely stripped away by months of learning humility. Of course, I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. Patricia sat down heavily, her hands folded in her lap like a child preparing to confess wrongdoing. I owe you an apology, she began, her voice shaking slightly. Not just for the engagement dinner, but for years of treating you badly. I waited, letting her find the words she needed to say. I was wrong about you, she continued. Wrong about your ambition, your capabilities, your worth as Andrew's partner. I was wrong about everything. Tears were forming in her eyes, but she pressed on. I judged you because you reminded me of myself before I married wealthy. You were working hard, building something, and I resented that because I had forgotten what that felt like. The confession hung between us like a bridge across years of hurt and misunderstanding. I know, I said simply, my voice gentle but not absolved. Patricia's breakdown was complete and genuine. Years of pride and entitlement crumbled as she faced the reality of who she had become. I spent so many years thinking that wealth made me better than other people, she continued, tears now flowing freely. I forgot that money was just luck, not accomplishment. She looked around my office, taking in the awards and recognition that represented years of hard work and genuine achievement. You built something real, she whispered. Something that matters. And I dismissed it because I was threatened by your success. I had imagined this moment many times over the years, Patricia acknowledging her cruelty and asking for forgiveness. But now that it was happening, I felt no triumph, only sadness for the years we had both lost to her bitterness. Why? I asked. Why were you so determined to make me feel inadequate? Patricia wiped her eyes with a tissue from the box on my desk. Because you represented everything I had given up. Ambition, independence, the ability to create something from nothing. I chose security over dreams, and seeing you pursue both made me feel like a failure. The honesty was painful but necessary. We were finally having the conversation that should have happened years ago. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Patricia said. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. You were never the problem. I was. Over the next few months, Patricia's transformation accelerated. The humility she had learned through financial loss and employment began reshaping her into someone entirely different. She started arriving early and staying late, not because it was required, but because she had discovered the satisfaction of contributing meaningfully to something larger than herself. Colleagues who had initially been wary began to appreciate her attention to detail and willingness to help with difficult tasks. She brought a level of organization and client service that improved our entire operation. Patricia's really found her stride, our office manager told me during a staff review. She's become one of our most reliable team members. The change was remarkable to witness. The entitled woman who had once demanded deference was now earning respect through competence and dedication. One afternoon, Patricia knocked on my office door with an expression of genuine amazement. I wanted to thank you, she said. Not just for the job, but for showing me what real accomplishment looks like. She gestured toward the bustling office beyond my door. You've built something incredible here. A business that matters, employees who care about their work, clients who trust your judgment. This is what success actually looks like. It was perhaps the first time Patricia had understood the difference between wealth and achievement. I visited Patricia's old house one weekend, curious to see the mansion that had once symbolized her superiority over me. The for sale sign had been replaced with sold, and the new owners were already making changes. The sprawling estate that had once intimidated me now looked empty and cold. I realized that for all its size and expense, it had never been a home in any meaningful sense. Standing in the circular driveway where I had once felt so inadequate, I understood something important about Patricia's original hostility. She had needed me to feel small because her own sense of worth was built on other people's perceived inadequacy. That could have been me, I whispered, imagining a life where status mattered more than substance. The house represented everything that had made Patricia cruel, the belief that external markers of success justified internal emptiness. I drove home to the modest house where Andrew and I had started our marriage, grateful for the warmth and authenticity that money couldn't buy. Patricia's punishment hadn't been losing her wealth, it had been discovering that wealth was the only thing that had given her life meaning. Now she was learning to find purpose in contribution rather than consumption, and the change was liberating her from decades of shallow priorities. After 6 months at our company, Patricia received a job offer from a larger firm. They wanted to hire her as an operations manager with significantly higher pay and benefits. She came to my office with the offer letter, looking torn between opportunity and loyalty. I don't know what to do, she said, sitting across from my desk. The money would help me rebuild my savings, but I don't want to leave the only person who ever gave me a real chance. I read through the offer carefully. It was a substantial opportunity that would allow Patricia to apply everything she had learned while significantly improving her financial situation. This is an excellent opportunity, I told her. You should take it. Patricia looked surprised. But I haven't finished learning everything you could teach me. You've learned the most important lesson, I replied. How to earn respect through effort rather than expecting it through circumstance. She hesitated, clearly conflicted. I'm afraid I'll forget what I've learned here. I'm afraid I'll go back to being the person I was before. You won't, I said with certainty. Because now you know the difference between being important and doing important work. I smiled at her genuine concern. Take the job, Patricia. That's growth. Patricia's last day at our company was emotional for everyone, but especially for her. She had spent 8 months discovering who she could be when she wasn't defined by wealth or social status. The woman who left that Friday afternoon was fundamentally different from the one who had arrived for her interview. She moved with quiet confidence earned through competence rather than inherited through marriage. I'm going to miss this place, she told me as she packed her personal items into a small box. This is the first time I've ever felt truly proud of work I've done. The staff gathered to wish her well, and several colleagues expressed genuine sadness about her departure. She had become valued not as the boss's mother, but as a dedicated team member. Before leaving, Patricia stopped at my office one final time. I know I can never undo the years when I treated you badly, she said, her voice steady but emotional. But I want you to know that working here changed my life. She hugged me for the first time since I had known her, and I could feel her gratitude in the embrace. Thank you for showing me who I really am, she whispered. As I watched her walk toward the elevator, I realized that justice had been served not through punishment, but through the opportunity for genuine transformation. 6 months after Patricia started her new job, she called me on a Tuesday evening. I had just gotten home from work and was making dinner when my phone rang. Erin, I hope I'm not bothering you. Patricia's voice was bright and confident in a way I had never heard before. Not at all. How are you settling in at the new company? Wonderfully, she said, and I could hear genuine happiness in her tone. I wanted to tell you about something that happened today. She went on to describe how she had defended a junior employee who was being treated unfairly by a senior manager. Instead of staying silent or avoiding conflict, Patricia had spoken up for someone who couldn't protect themselves. I kept thinking about how you treated me when I was vulnerable, she explained. How you could have humiliated me but chose to help me grow instead. I'm proud of you, I said, meaning every word. I called because I wanted to tell you something I should have said years ago, Patricia continued, her voice growing serious. I'm proud of you too. Proud of what you've built, proud of the person you are, proud that my son was smart enough to marry you. The words I had waited 8 years to hear finally came, and I discovered that I no longer needed them for validation. I already knew my worth. Looking back on the journey from that humiliating engagement dinner to Patricia's transformation, I realized that the most powerful victory wasn't proving her wrong about me. It was helping her discover something right about herself. Patricia had said I wasn't good enough for her son, measuring my worth by standards that valued appearance over substance, wealth over work, status over character. But I had never needed to be good enough for her approval. The real challenge was becoming good enough for my own standards, building something meaningful that could withstand any external judgment. Our design company now employed 30 people and served clients across multiple industries. We had created jobs, launched careers, and contributed something positive to our community. More importantly, we had proven that success built on genuine value was more durable than any privilege inherited through accident of birth. Patricia's transformation from entitled socialite to dedicated professional was perhaps the most unexpected outcome of her original cruelty. By learning to earn respect rather than demand it, she had discovered a sense of purpose that wealth could never provide. Andrew and I still lived in our original neighborhood, though in a larger house that reflected our success. We had learned that happiness came from building something together rather than impressing people who didn't matter. She had mocked me for not being good enough for her son. But I had never needed to be good enough for anyone except myself. And that was a standard I had exceeded beyond her ability to measure.